But I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you to John Stemberger, who I've worked with together for many years here in Florida, for making this possible, and to all of you for having me here today. I'm truly honored and grateful, and I'm excited about the fact that we are joined by friends from 18 different countries. Is that right? Yes. And I appreciate the fact that you're with us here today. We're going to get a little local in my speech and talk about some of the challenges we face in our country. But I certainly, as you saw earlier, presented some of the same challenges we face around the world. It's an interesting time in American history. People are as angry at each other and as uncertain about the future as they have ever been, certainly in my lifetime. People are worried about what it will take to be successful. How is it that you get ahead in life in the 21st century? All the things they were told they needed to do to succeed don't seem to be working for many of them anymore. And bitterly divided. The anger that today is palpable in our politics, by the way, is not an accident. When your highest profile political figure, as a matter of course, travels the country and constantly tells Americans that the reason why they're worse off is because someone else is too well off. When they deliberately pit Americans against each other on issues of society and economics. When the most powerful and well-known political figure in your country does this, it will divide your people. And it's amazing to believe that the man who today occupies the White House is the same man who spoke at the 2004 Democratic Convention about how there was no red America or blue America, only a united America. And now, of course, we see a very different course of action. And I think that our country is paying a terrible price because of that, irrespective of policy. These are difficult times. For those of us who share the values that we do share, rooted in our tradition as a nation founded on principles of faith, it's a time of extreme challenge as well. So we look at all these things and we feel almost overwhelmed. And we ask ourselves, how are we going to turn this around? It reminds me of it feels almost impossible sometimes. And we feel besieged. It reminds me of a story that I was told recently. It was an anecdote, or a fairy tale, I suppose, about a young woman who was walking through the desert and comes upon a lamp. So she starts rubbing the lamp, and out comes a genie from that lamp. And she says, this is great, I'm going to get 3 wishes. The genie says, no, times are tough, only 1 wish nowadays. She says, okay, 1 wish. She, of course, is very altruistic. She says, here's my wish. And she opens up a map of the Middle East. And she says, I would love for you, my wish is that peace come to this region of the world. People that have been fighting each other for so long, that peace would come. And the genie says, look, some things are just not possible. Ask me anything else, but this is just impossible. It's deeply rooted. It's thousands of years. There's nothing we can do. Ask me anything else, but I can't do that wish. She says, fine, here's my second wish. My second wish is that I will find a good man, that he will love me, that he won't spend all day watching sports, that he'll take long walks at the park, that he'll share books with me that we'll read together. That's my wish. I want a good man. And the genie turns to her and says, let me see that map again. So sometimes things feel impossible, right? Sometimes things appear impossible. Some things look like they can't be done. That is not the case for us. I believe that before us lie 2 very clear choices as Americans. And when I say as Americans, quite frankly, the world as well. The 21st century can either be another American century, or we will be the first generation to leave the next worse off than ourselves. There is no other route. There is no middle way. There is no third alternative. One of those 2 things will happen. Either the 21st century will also be an American century, or we will be the first generation ever to leave the next generation worse off. Why are we facing this challenge, and what will it take to make the right choice? It begins by understanding how we in America have defined success for 238 years. And it's never been defined by how much money you make or how many things you own. It's largely been defined by the ability to achieve a life of your choosing, the ability to worship as you please, to instill in your family the values that you cherish, the ability to do something productive with your time, a job that not just provides for your family but gives purpose and meaning to your days. And for millions of people, like my parents, an almost obsessive focus on leaving your children better off than yourself, giving them the chance to do all the things you yourself never could. And for over 230 some odd years, we have told people that the way you achieve that in America is if you work hard and you persevere, you can have that better life. You may not be a millionaire, you may not be a billionaire, but that's never what the American dream has been about. But if you work hard and you persevere, you can get ahead. But today, millions of people are starting to believe that's no longer true. And there are a lot of different reasons why that's happening. One of them is that our economy has rapidly transformed. Not that long ago, we just had a national economy. And we sold things to each other, and you could drop out of high school and go work at the town factory and work there for 40 years and retire with a pension. And those days are gone. We now live in a global economy where your investors and your clients and your partners are just as likely to be from halfway around the world as they are from halfway down the street. And that has disrupted people's lives. Jobs that once supported our middle class have gone overseas or been replaced by machines. Theoretically, new jobs could be created to replace them, but they're not being created fast enough because we've made America a less competitive place to invest and to innovate. Some of those higher paying jobs, all of them, quite frankly, require a higher level of skill and education, but millions of our people don't have it. These are real challenges. But there's something else that doesn't get nearly enough attention. And that is that our culture has also eroded. It's not just that our tax code is bad or that our regulatory code is bad. It's that our culture has also eroded. Our culture, when it's strong and our nation was strong, was based on certain principles and values. And in fact, those values led to what we call the success sequence. I spoke about this earlier today with another group here. The success sequence is well established and not difficult to understand. It goes like this. You get an education, you get a job, you get married, you have children within that marriage. If you do those four things, your chances of success in America are extraordinary. Does that mean that if one of those four is missing, you cannot succeed? No, of course not. We all know people in our own lives or in our own families that have succeeded despite the fact that they never got married, or despite the fact that they may have had a child out of wedlock. Of course, there are people that will succeed. But in my family, at least, they are usually the first ones to tell you how difficult it was and how they wish something better for their children, how they wish the success sequence for them. And if you look at our culture today, every single element of that sequence is eroding. On the issue of education, we've discussed it already. But it bears noting that we have a 20th century education system that will never meet the needs of the 21st. We have a higher education cartel in America that basically protects itself, charges students more and more money every year, and graduates them with degrees that don't lead to jobs. And they use their influence on government to prohibit alternatives and competitors from emerging. And the result is that millions of people are being left behind. We are divided between haves and have-nots, those that have higher education and those that do not have some form of higher education. By the way, we've also stigmatized careers and trades in America. At some point, we decided to tell kids that if they wanted to be a welder or a plumber, they were not nearly as successful as someone who decided to graduate with a major in Greek philosophy. Even though it's going to be easier to find a job as a welder than it is to find a job as a Greek philosopher. We need to change that. The second is the value of work has eroded in America. The value and that value of work has eroded. And government is partially guilty of that. And I point to our anti-poverty programs as evidence of it. 50, 60 years ago, this government began a war on poverty, and that war remains incomplete. Why? Because our anti-poverty programs, they deal with the pain of poverty, but they don't do anything or nearly enough to help people emerge from it. The example I used earlier is, imagine if, God forbid, you were to fall now and fracture your arm. And you went to the hospital and the doctor saw you and said, you have a broken arm. Here's a lifetime prescription, supply of painkillers to deal with your pain. And you're like, I want to fix my arm. Thank you for the painkiller. I don't want to have pain tonight, but I want my arm to heal. Well, that's our anti-poverty programs. They help people become comfortable in their poverty. It doesn't do nearly enough to help people emerge from it. The greatest cure for poverty is a job. And we have to do everything we can to value that. The third is the value of marriage. And when I talk about marriage, what I mean is one man and one woman married. And why do I define marriage that way? I'll tell you why. It's not because I desire to discriminate against anyone. It is none of my business who you love, who you want to live with. That's none of my business. And I can tell you what my faith teaches about it, but we all make our own choices in life. And you have the right to do that in a free nation. That's not my issue. My issue is that there is this institution that has proven through thousands of years of human history to be the single most effective way to raise strong and productive human beings. And it's called a marriage, a traditional marriage. And it's so successful, it's been so productive for humanity that we've elevated it above every other relationship and enshrined it in the law. And so when I promote and stand for traditional marriage, it isn't because I sit in judgment of anyone. It's because I understand how productive that relationship has been for humanity, the difference that it's made in people's life, and the important role that it plays in the success sequence that I just outlined. But more importantly, for those of us who serve in government, we must ensure that all of our policies are pro-marriage, that our tax code is pro-marriage. Last but not least, it's about raising children within a two-parent home after marriage. And again, this is a value that we should strengthen. We should have a pro-family tax code as well. But here's what else we can do to strengthen parenting in America. Empower parents. And the single most effective way we can empower parents is by ensuring that they are the ultimate authority on where their children go to school. And the truth is that wealthy people in America do have school choice. They can afford to send their kids to any school they want. People that are not wealthy, upper middle class, they either sacrifice to send their kids to a private school, or they move into a neighborhood with a better school. The only people in America that don't have school choice are the poor. The only people in America who are forced by the government to send their kids to a failing school are the poor. The only people in America that we deny the full power of parenting are the poor. This isn't just counterproductive, it's immoral. It's wrong. And we need to change that every chance we get. So what can we do about this? You say to me, Mr. Senator, what law can you pass? What program can you create to strengthen families and marriage? Listen, there are laws we can do to make it easier for people to go to school. There are laws we can do to help improve what those schools are teaching. Not through a Common Core, but through a curriculum that makes sense. There are laws we can pass to help our economy grow so that it produces more jobs. There are changes we can make in the tax code to promote marriage and to strengthen it, certainly not to punish it. And there are things that we can do to empower parents, like school choice. There are things government can do, but there's something else we need. We need our political leaders to recognize the impact that societal breakdown is having on our country, on our economy, on our society. And we don't do that nearly enough. We spend a lot of time telling people, and rightfully so, that if you smoke, it could cause cancer. And it's true, and we should tell them that. We spend a lot of time telling people that if you're overweight, you're going to have diabetes and heart disease, and we should tell them that. We also need to tell people that if you get divorced, sometimes it's unfortunately unavoidable, but you need to know divorce is bad for children. It's disruptive for their lives. You need to tell people that marriage is important. Again, not because we're sitting in judgment of anyone, but because the facts tell us this. We need to tell people that the best way you can succeed is to go to school, get a job, get married, and have children after you get married. And we need to have government officials that are willing to say that, because you cannot separate the social well-being of your people from their economic well-being. And you can't turn this country around until you turn its people around first. And so we need leaders that are willing to acknowledge that publicly. But our greatest obligation is in our own lives. In what are we do in our role as a father and a mother and a husband and a wife. And what you do in organizations like this, what you do as scout leaders, what you do as a volunteer at your church. It is in our everyday lives that we're going to have the biggest impact on the future of our country. What you do in your everyday life will have more of an impact on the future of America than how you vote. And I want you to vote. But I also want you to be active fathers and mothers and husbands and wives, and to live out your values in every aspect of your life, and to have the freedom to live out those values. And that's important for us to recognize, because too often time in our society, every time we have a problem, the immediate question is, what law can we pass? What program can we create? What great speech can the president give to turn these things around? Sometimes the answer is with us, in our homes, in our families, the single most important institution in all the world, in our churches, where the values that those families teach are reinforced. You see, all these values I've outlined to you, the values of education and hard work and marriage and parenting, no one is born with those values. There is no human being that's born as an infant and just naturally has those values. Those values have to be instilled, and they have to be reinforced. And values that are instilled, they're instilled in families. And they're reinforced by the institutions in society that support families, like churches and faith communities and other civic organizations. And when you stop teaching those values, and even worse, when your popular culture starts mocking those values, deriding those values, and when your government leaders start undermining the credibility and the moral standing of the institutions that teach those values, the result is a cultural disaster. And you can cut all the taxes in the world. You can eliminate all the regulations. You can balance your budget for 20 years straight. You still won't turn this country around if the values critical for success are not instilled in our people by strong families. So, I'll close with 2 points. The first is, I'm motivated to do something about all this because I believe that what we have in America is historically unique. I know for a fact, and I think all of you do too, that the experience that we have as Americans has no precedent in all of human history. If you look at the course of human history through thousands of years, almost everyone that has ever lived has lived in a society where their future was determined by the circumstances of their birth. If you were born into a rich and powerful family, you got to be rich and powerful. If you were born into a poor family, you got to be poor. It didn't matter how talented you were. It didn't matter how hard you were willing to work. It didn't matter what skills you had. You were basically stuck doing whatever your family did before you. If you look at the course of human history, few people have ever had any role to play in deciding who leads them. We live in a unique place where none of this is true. And it has been unique because we were founded on a principle that is not a political one. It was a spiritual one. And the principle was this, that every single human being is born with certain rights that the government is not entitled to deny them, because those rights didn't come from government. They didn't come from laws. They came from God. And when you found a nation on a principle like that, what flows from it is 238 years of exceptionalism. What flows from it is a free enterprise system of government that says, we don't care where you were born or how poor you were on the day you were born. You're going to get the same chance to succeed as anyone else because we believe you have the God-given right to do that. What flows from it is a free republic that says you're going to get to choose who leads you. What flows from it is a constitution that says in this country, you can worship in any way that you choose, free from interference of the state or anyone else. What flows from it is exceptional. And that's led us not just to be an exceptional nation, but one thing we should never forget, we're also a blessed nation. And I believe that the reason why we're blessed is because we have adhered to the ancient admonition that to those who much is given, much is expected. And if you look at our nation for a moment, you recognize how much we've been given. Look at our land, protected on both sides by vast oceans. Look at our resources, unlike any in the world. What nation, what piece of land on the planet would you trade for ours? Look at our people. Despite all the challenges that we face, who in the world would you rather be? What nation on this planet now would you trade places with? What nation do you look to and say, I wish we were them instead of us? We aren't just an exceptional people, we are a blessed people. And the reason why God has continued to honor that blessing is because of what America has done with those blessings. Anytime there is a tragedy on this planet, the first people there aren't just the American government, but the American people acting through charities and civic organizations. And God honors that. I saw it firsthand in the Philippines, where when I landed on the ground, it wasn't USAID anymore. It was Samaritan's Purse and Catholic Relief Services, and others who were taking care of those there who were suffering. The same could be said for Haiti and anywhere else on this planet. You name me a great moral cause in the world where America and its people, not just its government, have not gotten engaged. God honors that. And the reason why we do these things isn't because we're better than other people. It goes back to our founding principle, because we believe that while those people don't live here, they have God-given rights too. It doesn't say all people born in North America. It doesn't say all people born in the United States. That all men, all people are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain rights. And we have acted on that. And that, as much as anything else, is what made us special. And by the way, the most generous nation in all of human history, not just through our government, but through our people. There are millions of people alive today in the African continent because of the generosity of the American people. They survive HIV/AIDS because of the generosity of the American people. And God honors those things. I believe it. He honors it in people, and He honors it with nations. We should never lose that aspect of ourselves. But the last point that I would raise is, and it's the one I used earlier when I spoke to a number of you. When people meet me, they say, oh, he doesn't come from privilege. His dad was a bartender, his mom was a maid or a cashier. It's true. My parents were never rich, never made a lot of money. I didn't inherit anything from them. We had one car, we owned a house. We took a vacation 1 week a year. We were fortunate, but we were certainly not connected. My dad couldn't pick up the phone and call a friend of his from Harvard and get me a job, and I don't criticize that, but he couldn't do that. They couldn't even pay for my education. I owed about $120,000, $130,000 in student loans that I recently paid off with the proceeds of my book, An American Son, available on paperback for a... So yeah, if that's your standard of privilege, I'm not privileged. If that's your standard of privilege, if what you think privilege is coming from a rich, politically connected family, you're right, I'm not privileged. That's not my standard. Let me tell you why I'm privileged. Because every single night I came home to a house where my mom and my dad were married to each other, they loved each other, and they loved us. I came home every night to a house I came home every night to a home where I wasn't just encouraged to dream big, it was demanded of me. I grew up in a home every single night where my parents made clear that I would have the opportunity to do things they never had a chance to do, so you better not blow it. I came home to a house that taught me that it doesn't matter that we're bartenders and maids. You could have the same dreams and the same future as the son of a president or a millionaire. I came home to a family that wouldn't point to people who were successful and say it's their fault that we're not better off. Instead, they would point to people who were successful and say, you see, if you work hard one day, you can be there too if that's what you want. I came home to a family that expected me to get an education, to work, to get married, and to produce some grandchildren. I came home to a strong and stable family. And I'm going to tell you that has been an extraordinary advantage in my life. Does that mean that people that don't have that have no chance? No. It means that we should be even more motivated to help them compensate for that lack, and hopefully to help them access it themselves. But it also means that we need to recognize what an advantage that is to have those things, and to not just inform our people of that, but to support them in the pursuit of it. And I'll tell you this 1,000,000 times. I wouldn't trade all of the fortunes of the world for the upbringing that I had. Because coming from a strong and stable home has been an extraordinary advantage for me, as it's been for millions who have had that opportunity. And at the end of the day, if we want to turn this country around, we have to start by turning our people around. And we will never turn them around unless we reinvigorate our culture towards the values that we know are necessary for success. Success in life is not going to be determined by the diplomas on the wall alone. You can have all the diplomas on the wall you can imagine. You can make all the money in the world. You will never truly be successful or at peace with yourself if certain values are not instilled in you and you live by them. And so my hope, as we discuss the issues that confront us as a nation, is that we make very clear to our people that this fiction, that the social and cultural well-being of our people has nothing to do with their economic well-being, is dispensed with. That is a lie. That this notion that this idea that you can be a fiscal conservative but not a social conservative, there's no such distinction. This notion that it's preached to me quite often, sometimes in fundraisers, don't talk about the social issues because it turns people off. Just focus on the economy. I can't focus on the economy if we don't focus on the culture. But most of all, I recognize at the end of the day that, yes, I can pass laws, or at least try to. I can give speeches to try to motivate people. But I have to recognize, and so do you, that the most important job we have is the job of husband and father. And for you, it could be, mother and wife. That is the most important job that I have. What happens in my house will be a lot more influential, and in your house will matter a lot more to the future of America than what happens in the White House. And I think that's probably the most important thing we need to take away from this. That while we should be alive and involved and engaged in our political debate, never afraid to raise the issues of our culture and the importance that they have to the future of our country, we should also recognize that it is in our own lives that we will have the greatest impact on the future of our nation. And I believe that if we can reinvigorate our culture, and we can reinvigorate our economy, and we can give people the skills they need for the 21st century, if we can do these three things, and they must do all three things, then I truly believe that the 21st century will also be an American century. And that then we will leave for our children what our parents left for us, what all Americans have left for their children in the past, the single greatest nation in the history of all mankind. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. Thank you.